Every disc golfer out there at some point has stepped up to a tee pad, saw the tee sign, and thought to themselves, okay, this is a little bit farther than my normal golf shot range with whatever disc I'm about to throw. So I'm going to have to throw it harder, or I'm going to have to disc up, or if you're throwing a driver already, then you're going to have to go to that like 90% mark, which isn't as consistent as your 80, 70% power type of throw. So I'm going to give you guys some tips to get more distance on the course. Now the first big tip I have for you guys is mostly going to apply to par 4s and par 5s, but that is to just pick a point in the fairway and focus on your angle and still go ahead and throw your 80% to 85% power shot. You might be able to incorporate some of the form tips I'm going to give you in just a minute here and get to that 90% power with more consistency. But basically for par 4s, par 5s, all you want to do is focus on a point in the fairway. Don't try and throw some massive crazy shot unless you can really throw like 550 or more. But now let's go to the field where I have some backhand tips and some sidearm tips.
Let's talk about some tips for sidearm and backhand to get you more distance on the course. Starting with backhand, let's talk about disc selection. So before we do that, what are some common misses from local pro players and local amateurs? So in my experience, the local pro is going to miss with a shot that has a disc that is slightly too understable, or it's understable but they don't throw it correctly. So the two misses I normally see from a local pro is going to be something where they're throwing backhand a little bit out to the left, going for a big high turnover that stays in the air for a long time, then comes back at the end. And then when you pull that shot off, it does go very far. But the other miss I typically see is when someone's trying to get to their 90%, 85% power that's, you know, slightly above the arm speed that they would normally throw a normal golf shot on. So they got like their 80% that they're comfortable with and they go every single time. And then they try to go one notch higher and they're throwing that disc that would normally go super far if they throw it out left and have it turn over. What normally happens is they're gonna throw it almost like straight and they turn it over and it almost turns into like a roller. It just kind of burns out and we don't normally get a full flight out of it. But at the same time, they don't have the wrong idea. They're trying to throw harder, but they just have the wrong disc selection. Now for amateurs, the typical miss I see is if they're trying to throw really hard is going to be like a late release. They'll kind of pull it off right? They're trying way too hard and obviously they're less experienced. So how do we fix all those problems with a little bit of disc selection? My advice to you is pick a slightly stable to more overstable disc. Not a disc that's so overstable that we won't get a full flight out of it, but a disc that's stable enough for where you're not even going to be tempted to go for that turnover route. You're just going to throw flat and hard. So if amateurs pull it late, there's a chance that this disc is going to fight out. And if you're a local pro throwing hard and straight, and instead of your understable disc, when this is like a yank and you're throwing it too low, you're going to throw your more overstable disc kind of flat and just straight. And then that way, it's just going to be a perfect flight. It's going to go straight, flat, maybe a little bit of turnover, and then fight out at the end. So what are some flight number recommendations for you guys? So I say get a glide of 4 or 5, nothing higher than 5. And then for turn -1 to 0, you don't really want a +1. There's not going to be a +1 pretty much of any mold that's going to be slightly understable unless it's some really old, slower speed disc. And then for fade, I definitely want 3 or more. I think the most important thing is have a glide of 5 and still make it an overstable disc. Because if it's a glide of 3, like I got a Star Max here, sure, I can throw this on a pretty good line. I'm going to throw it in a minute, but it won't go as far as something like a Destroyer with 5 glide. And if we're trying to get more distance on the course, control is important, but obviously we want to maximize as much distance as we can with just a little tweaking. So that's disc selection. Now let me give you guys a form tip that has kind of added a little bit of speed for me. And I think about this when I'm really trying to throw harder. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about a 360 here where you can get the most distance. We're throwing a different disc for that. So I want you to take your stable disc that I want you to throw flat, but this is what I want you to think about as you kind of run up. So a tip that Ezra Aderholt gave to Paul Ulibarri is basically like, let the hand just kind of like follow the body instead of actively reaching back. Instead of going like here and then just going, just kind of let the hand follow the body. And then as soon as your front foot touches the ground, that's when you want to achieve that reach back, if you want to call it a reach back. So you come here, you're facing the target as long as possible, and then when you finally get to that last step, you're already ready to go. You could see like my body was starting to come forward. This has helped me a lot more than actively like coming here and then reaching back. It feels like I've gained a bit of speed, and it feels like I can instantly just kind of pop towards that target. So another thing to be wary about when you're doing this is that I want you to make sure that you're trying to get a flat angle. So make sure you position your body right for a flat angle, you know, not too Anheuser. Anheuser might be okay if it's a more overstable disc, but make sure you're not doing hyzer. It's really easy to do hyzer when you're trying to just let your hand follow. Second thing I want to give you guys is the actual pull. So I kind of just try to make my arm loose. I think about Kyle Klein. He's kind of like, that's a bad impersonation, but that's kind of what I think about. I'm just like, from here to about like here, my arm is just loose, and I'm letting my hand just follow. My arm is like not flexing at all till maybe the very end. And when I finally get to that last step right here and I'm ready to pull, what I think about is I'm trying to go across my chest as fast as possible, or like right below my chest, but I'm really trying to like elbow somebody when I'm really trying to throw hard. And honestly, if I do that, the disc goes a lot farther. Now, I'm not saying I do this every single throw, but when I'm trying to go for that 85%, 95%, I'm really thinking about like when I'm here, that I'm just trying to, as fast as I can. And there's been times where like I can remember doing that, and then it'll just like, the disc will stay in the air like maybe 3 seconds longer than normal. Like, it definitely goes a lot farther if you really think about right here, and then you just go elbow. You just try to get elbow, go. For a golf shot, that's pretty good. I mean, that's not like my max distance throw by any means, but I think on pretty much every single hole that I would ever play in my whole life that I have to throw straight, I would be very okay with that throw. Anyways, let's move on to sidearm. Things are going to get a little bit different. Let's talk about disc selection for sidearm, and then we'll talk about the tip that will get you more distance. So if you guys don't really know how to throw sidearm, I have a video on how to throw sidearm. We're not really going to talk about how to throw sidearm. I'm going to just give you some like insider tips, if you will. But let's talk about disc selection. So for sidearm, for max distance, the angle we're going to throw requires a stable to slightly understable disc. Not a disc you would throw on a roller, maybe a disc that you could get onto a roller with backhand, but we're talking about a disc that is going to have a decent amount of turn at the start of the flight, but will have enough fade to come back. So my recommendations flight-wise are gonna be a glide of 5 to 6, a turn of 0 to -3, only get a disc with 0 turn if it's an understable mold of that disc, and fade has to be 3 or higher. There's not going to be any negotiation here, because that skip at the end can give us up to like 30 to maybe 50 feet in some cases. So why do we want a more understable disc? The flight I'm going to show you guys is the reason why, but if you look at a more stable disc, this is a max, this is a rate, they're both 11 speed, but the max is almost like twice as thick, right? So the understable disc is going to cut through the air a little bit longer and definitely go farther. Obviously, a more overstable disc, its goal is to like be controllable and then just fight the wind and then die out at the end. It's not going to be a disc that you want to fly in the air for a long time. So in my experience, the more understable molds are typically going to have more glide and go farther for you. All right, now that we got that out of the way, what is the flight shape for a max distance on the course sidearm? So what I want you guys to do is find the right side of the fairway, which is going to be that fence on the right for me, and the left side of the fairway, which is going to be that other fence on the left. And what I want you to do is I want you to take your disc and aim it at the right side of the fairway, slightly flat or maybe ever so slightly turned over, or if it's more understable, slightly on hyzer. I want you to aim at the right side of the fairway and just throw flat and hard. And this is gonna be about like 70-75% for me. I'm just throwing it flat and hard at the right side of the fairway, and I'm gonna let the disc turn over on its own. And since it has 3 fade, it's gonna fight back and then get a skip at the end. That's going to maximize our distance. Now, it's a little bit cold out here. I have the disc that I'm showing in the clip right now of the same shape I want, and we'll give this one a try, but the thing is, once it gets colder, the discs stiffen up a bit, so not sure if I'll get that exact same flight. Now, with a lot of tailwind, you can't really expect them to turn over too much. But even though it got pushed down and it hyzered out right away, you can see like I still got a considerable amount of distance picking the right disc and not having to force an angle. I'm literally just throwing flat out to the right and trying to let it do its thing. Now, obviously there's some wind out here right now. I'm still able to get some pretty good distance without actually doing much. All right, guys, that's gonna wrap up the video. Hopefully this helps. Comment down below if this helps you out at all. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. We're almost at 1,000, and then I can start getting paid on this channel once I hit 1,000. So make sure to help me do that. Also, I tried to record this video like a whole bunch of times, so hopefully this one makes the cut. Anyways, let's send this last disc.